Nice way to start, right? Good morning, everybody. And welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Long Beach. My name is Phibun, and I'm delighted to welcome you today. UUCLB strives to be a welcoming and inclusive religious community rooted in love, trust, and freedom. We are bound together in a shared covenant, building a religious community guided by respect and sustained by our 8 Unitarian Universalist principles. Another special welcome to those of you who are new or visiting our church for the first or second time. We're glad that you're here. If you are a visitor to our in-person service, we are so glad to welcome you. If you are interested in learning more about the church, please stop by the membership table after the service. Please note that we have an area on this side of the room that is fragrance-free for people sensitive to fragrances. I'd also like to remind you to silence your electronic devices. Every Sunday this summer, kids and youth are welcome to join religious education staff Amy Phibun and Nika Ahmad out by the picnic tables for ice cream making and other activities. Religious education sessions will be starting soon, so please register your children and consider supporting our program as a teacher, facilitator, or volunteer. Our Rainbow Room has officially moved to rooms 2 and 3 and is also open for infants and children under 5. After the service, if you're watching us on Zoom, please stay for our virtual coffee hour, where you can chat with others in the congregation. For those who are on site with us, please feel free to mingle outside for coffee and conversation. Let's take a moment to greet one another respectfully and warmly. Okay, if we could start taking our seats.
Hurting the cats.
So we want to start talking about announcements. Let's talk about announcements. Who wants to hear announcements? Norma does. We got a few announcements, and we have a interesting service to keep moving towards. We can talk some more outside, coffee hour, chatting, getting to know each other, fist bumping. So we're going to talk about announcements. And I'm going to introduce Jan Goodwin for the first announcement.
Sit down, please. Sit down, please. Oh, please, won't you sit down? Third grade, but also 1776. Hi. Oh, yeah. So good. I mean, you didn't watch it on July 4th? So good to see you all. I hope most of you know that we've been working on a memorial wall and memorial patio in the space between the office and Conrad Shed. Lots of things are moving along. I have learned so much. The concrete has been poured for the patio. This last week, we met with the shade sail man. He measured for it, and they are starting to make the shade sail. It will be ready in a few weeks. We are working on redoing Conrad's wall. We're going to clean off the stucco and put a brown coat over it. I'm looking for screws that will go through the wall. Anyway, what's most important for you to know is that we are at the point now where we can accept reservations for the tiles on the walls. So if you are interested in reserving a tile for yourself or another member or friend, please come see me after service out by the memorial patio. Thank you.
Next is Lorraine Neal.
I want to tell you how great you're all doing. We will have 1,000 postcards just this summer. Yeah. Right now, I think 2/3 of the Florida ones are back, and half of the Texas ones have gone out. And remember, as Mauricio told you, we're going to mess with Texas. And not only all of that, there have been at least 80 of you writing. I don't know how many. It's all going so fast I can't count. And I know at least 5 people have spread it out with friends and neighbors and have other postcard things going now. So we're bursting out of the seams. And very soon, we'll in a couple of weeks, we'll be talking to you about letters. Thank you so much.
Danilo.
Hey everybody, just a quick announcement. We are officially streaming to YouTube now, and I would like to request to go on our page, subscribe, and hit notification button. It looks like a little bell. You can basically, in the coming weeks, be able to go on our website and click on our YouTube icon and go on there. And I wanted just to say thanks to all the team that worked on it. We worked really hard starting November last year to get this happening. So, please check it out, and don't forget to subscribe. The channel name would be UUCLB, just at UUCLB on YouTube. Yep. And you'll be able to also find it on our website. Thank you.
Check out the more announcements on the back of your order of service, but one to highlight is today there's an artist reception after service at 3 o'clock here in Welder Hall, so check that out. Okay, today several members of our church will be sharing how jazz impacts them or on the world around us. During our planning for the service, Reverend Lissa and Gavin suggested that we invite Danny to help us with the music. So welcome to our guest musician, Danny Pravder. Danny is an exceptional multi-genre pianist, music producer, music director, and composer with a passion for sharing love and light through the creation of music and community. At just 16 years old, Danny won the grand prize in the National Dave Brubeck Jazz Piano Competition and was the recipient of the Young Emerging Artist Scholarship in honor of legendary jazz pianist Dave Brubeck. Brubeck listened to Danny's piano playing and in response spoke of a beautiful musicianship and powerful commitment to teaching, community, and collaboration. Danny has music directed, choir directed, and accompanied at various churches, including our own UUCLB. We're grateful to welcome him back for Jazz Sunday. And now for the chalice lighting. This is Infinite Possibilities of Love by Reverend Tom Goldsmith. Symbol of light and knowledge, symbol of warmth and freedom. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love.
Good morning. In just a moment, we're going to sing our first hymn together. But before we do, I've been asked to share something with you. Many of you may have already seen this announcement. It went on Friday. But in case you haven't, I'm going to go ahead and read you the letter that I wrote. Dear UUCLB members and community, after careful consideration, I have submitted my resignation from my duties at UUCLB. I've accepted a choral director position at another institution that begins on September 1st. I will be unable to maintain both positions, unfortunately. This was a difficult decision, but the one that will ultimately best meet the needs of myself and my family. I will, of course, fulfill my responsibilities through August 31st. I'm realizing there's a lot more information in this letter than you need here today, so I'm going to skip parts of it. But I will be here. I'm here today. I will be here next Sunday, but that will be my last Sunday here. So I'll be able to say goodbye to you next week. Please accept my gratitude, accept my deepest gratitude for your dedication and welcoming spirit and collaboration. I've enjoyed working with each of you in the congregation, and I wish the entire community the best in the next chapter. I'm so proud of the music we've created together, and I will always cherish the connections that we've made here at UUCLB. Thank you. Now, if you would please rise in body or spirit and join us in hymn 1007, There's a River Flowing in My Soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my mind, in my mind. There's a river flowing in my mind, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing in my soul. In my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul.
And now for some meditation. This is meditation on Musica Universalis by Joel Tishkin. The ancient Greek philosopher Pythagoras taught that the universe was composed entirely of numbers, and numbers corresponded to music. So the entire universe, all of reality, including us, was composed of numbers and music. The 7 planets of the ancient world each resonated a frequency outward into the universe. Musica Universalis, or harmony of the spheres, shows each planet as a different note on the musical scale. Their music was not something we heard audibly, but their cosmic vibration, their resonance could impact us, as all music could. Pythagoreans believed that music purified and nourished our souls, keeping us spiritually healthy in the same way exercise and nutrition does for our body. I invite you to contemplate, what music do you need to purify or nourish your soul right now? As we enter into 1 minute of silence, I invite you to consider the song that is speaking to you at this moment. Imagine it is resonating within you, but also outward in all directions, bringing your resonance to those next to you, then the people next to them, outward until it fills the room, connecting you with everyone else, communicating where you are today. May our collective silence bring harmony to ourselves and everyone in our orbit. In this congregation, we witness to one another's lives in our times of celebration and in suffering. We lift up these joys of our lives, small and large, and we mourn grief, loss, hardship within our families, our own UUCLB community, the greater Long Beach community, and our larger world. We rejoice with you and send you comfort. Let us widen our circle of care and hold one another in compassion and love. Our mic and online chat will be open to share joys and sorrows we wish to hold in our caring embrace. Please come up and share your joy or sorrow. Is there any? Oh.
Hi, everybody. I'm Trisha Wade. Longtime member, not as long as Jan, I think, since preteen and childhood. Anyhow, wanted to give a big thanks for the wonderful event yesterday, resurrected by Mike and Edie. Mike here, the Pinewood Derby car race. We had a blast. I think I came in second in some category. But it is a lot of work. And Mike started this like 15 years ago, and it ran for X number of years, and there was a break, and something got in him, and he wanted to do it again, and we had the best time. And it was so fun to see all the different cars and the kids represented. So thank you, Mike.
Sure. Hello, everyone. David Kelmet. I just got back yesterday from the mountains. I went camping for a week, and my best friend married his 39 years partner. So the wedding was on Friday, so on Wednesday he says, "You gotta be my best man." And on Thursday he says, "You're the wedding planner also." And an hour before the wedding he says, "You have to give a speech." And I was like, so I didn't prepare anything for the speech, so I said, like, I want to be as surprised as everybody else of what's going to come out of my mouth. And he came out pretty good. I was very romantic. The music was great. It was really sunny, so it was very hot. And but it was just surrounded by nature, and it was wonderful and lovely. My husband came on Friday. On Friday or Saturday? Yes, he got there on Friday before the wedding with the groom, and they got lost on the road because it's kind of difficult to get there. So I had to walk 10 miles to find them. And as a professional wedding planner as I am, I walked there to find them, guiding them to the camp. And so I'm limping more because I was walking on very irregular ground there. It's not the easiest ground to walk in, but I came back energized and happy to. I was excited to come into church, and then Gavin gave me that horrible news that he's leaving, and I'm gonna miss you, man. He tells me that I can sing. Is that how my voice sounds? It's horrible. Anyways, so that's all I have. Thank you very much for listening.
And please introduce yourself.
Where? This. Oh, right here. Gotcha. My name is Frederick Rose, and this joy is a day ahead of time, but it's a joy anyways. Tomorrow will mark 6 months of sobriety for me. It's a day ahead of time, but otherwise I would have to wait until next week, and nothing is turning me back. So yeah, I'm extremely grateful for every piece of support that has brought me here, of which this church is one. Thanks.
I need a tape right here or something. Hi, Elaine Bernal. So my joy is that our youngest is starting high school tomorrow, right? And our oldest is starting his second year of college next Monday, and they still want to hang out with us. We spent 5 hours at the Neon Retro Arcade in Pasadena yesterday, so that was really cool. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric So. I have both a personal joy and a personal sorrow to share. My personal joy is that my work staff is moving to a new building. So today I'm going over to my new office space to get everything set up so that I can be ready for my first day in that building tomorrow. My personal sorrow is that my commute is going to have to be all driving, since our new building is too far to walk. So no more walks at all for me to work. I will miss walking completely. But it'll be a great new building for my work staff.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Misako, and my sorrow is for the children in Gaza, the pain and tragedy they're going through. But also, my joy is in their capacity to feel joy even now in their pain, and when they'll be able to feel and play and joy again in freedom. Also, I want to express my joy for Phibun hosting the Jazz Appreciation event today, because it is one of the greatest passions in my life and is one of the 2 art forms that this country has produced with a tremendous legacy of pride. Thank you.
I'm Jonelle, and my husband Tom, my driver. The orthopedist says I may not leave the house unless it's in a wheelchair because I cheat. And things are not healing as fast as they should or could. I was in Martha's Vineyard with some of the members from this congregation, our writing group that we've been together 10 years, and I fell. And I got to ride in a helicopter, which was excessively expensive. That's still in negotiations, but and our son flew in, so he was his company in Oregon, Washington. They have family leave, so he was with me for 10 days, which was nice. I was in Boston, whatever. It is a huge Massachusetts General. It is a huge, and I've now met many a medical person who spent time at Mass General learning. So. Anyway, that's it. Well, this is my first time out and first time here. Thank you.
With these words and the silent prayers and meditations of our hearts, we say amen. May it be so and amen. Also, I had a note to correct the announcement. The event today starts right after church, 11:30, the artist's reception. Okay, now our Sunday offering helps to sustain our congregation alongside the generous pledges and contributions of our members and friends. Thank you for your financial support of UUCLB and all you do to help our church thrive. Our offering will now be received.
Cry me a river. Now you say you're sorry. Cry me a river. Hi, I am Annie Buchanan. So I am a lucky woman. Thank you, Arthur. This never works for me. All right. I am a lucky woman. I am lucky to be a member of this church. And I'm really lucky because I live with my daughter, my son-in-law, and 2 of my grandchildren. So I want to share with you how jazz got us through as a family the COVID pandemic. So cast your minds back to those first awful days of March and April 2020. The news was dire. Suddenly our lives were pitched into a world where we were told to go home and stay there, where people in New York were dying by the thousands, where we wore masks. There was no vaccine, not even a talk of one on the horizon. And the word Zoom became an everyday catchword. It was a time of high anxiety. So my daughter decided there would be a standing rule in our home. K-Jazz would play at low volume all day in the family room. We might be in our rooms watching the horrible news on our laptops while the kids were in their rooms on Zoom school. But when we all came together for a meal or just walked into the kitchen for a snack, there were the voices of Frank or Ella or Diana or the mellow tones of Charlie's saxophone. It was the sound of sanity in a world gone crazy. Now, I can't end this without telling you that K-Jazz is ours. It is owned by Cal State Long Beach. The station antenna is on top of Signal Hill, and K-Jazz is recognized as the top jazz and blues station in the entire country. It's a it's a jewel of our city, and we can be proud of it. So my advice, if things get bad, tune into KJZZ. It might just see you through it. Thank you.
Hello. You know, when I was first asked about saying a few words on this topic by Phibun, my immediate reaction was, yeah, I like jazz. She knows it. She knows it. We've been to a few concerts together. But the more I thought about how I like jazz, the more I realized how it affected my life in relatively narrow but still some very deep ways. Music, and more specifically jazz, in some ways has been what I would consider my gateway drug to many unforeseen niches and directions in my life. I remember in the early years of the 1960s, I was just a little guy. Little did I know that some of the jazz that I discovered in my parents' old RCA stereo cabinet, Glenn Miller's Moonlight Serenade and In the Mood, would be but a few of the pieces that would lend themselves to some poignant shared listening time during my parents' final months. Of course, back then, it was difficult to compete with the musical track to Sword in the Stone, which I was really into at that time. Jumping forward to the teen years, rock and roll became a mainstay of my musical experience, but as I graduated high school, jazz came into focus. The unexpected rhythms, the unexpected notes, keys, and scales that jazz was liberated to explore seemed to align with and perfectly complement, more as a metaphor than a gateway drug, but they complemented my wish to explore new things in the world around me during my college years, some of which I actually remember. I found irresistible jazz fusion artists such as Al Di Meola, Chick Corea, and his piece entitled Spain, and an album by bassist Stanley Clark. They all injected a visceral and energizing the same kind of energizing visceral reaction in me that hard rock gave, but with the musical complexity that was mentally engaging. Then moving forward with the gateway to a more mentally engaging type of music, I listened to the music of the likes of Dave Brubeck mentioned earlier, Paul Desmond, and then came to the album Suite for Flute and Jazz Piano with Claude Bolling and Jean-Pierre Rampal, that some of you may be familiar with, which brought such a refined musicality to music's adventures. Also, as one who had been playing the guitar for some time at that time, jazz became a gateway to different historical and cultural forms of music for me. Specifically, guitar-based ragtime blues. The finger-picking guitar tablature music I found by early guitar pickers such as Blind Lemon Jefferson and then contemporaries like Taj Mahal became an adventure to learn. And about that time, I went to a performance of Sophisticated Ladies, which was a musical review of Duke Ellington. I fell in love with that music and the prolific genius that Duke Ellington brought. I also heard Billie Holiday's Strange Fruit. Still chokes me up. A vivid and poignant historical indictment of the ability to murder with impunity during the Jim Crow era as long as the victim was black. That's when I began to read about some of the difficulties that such musicians also had, being black in an oppressive white world. Things which were not taught by my earlier education at all. Now, to be real, becoming familiar with the music of a given time and culture does not give anything more than a superficial understanding of the deep and complex nature of any time or culture. But it may be a link to motivate a deeper dive into an historic or cultural perspective or history, a gateway drug. On to later life, during the last few months of my father's life, I visited him almost every day at the skilled nursing facility. And some of those days we spent listening to and discussing various genres of music, including jazz standards of Tex Beneke and Glenn Miller and others. Dad shared stories about early days with Dear Mom, as well as a few World War II stories that were jogged loose by these adventures. But what happens when someone is physically unable to access that music that they once loved? In my mother's waning years, her hearing became so poor and distorted, even with the hearing aids, listening to CDs brought more frustration than enjoyment. However, we were at least able to take Mom on rare occasion to a tribute big band concert here and there. She did glean some measure of enjoyment from these. To summarize, jazz has corrupted me in many ways. Any inclination to stay protected in an historical, societal, and cultural bubble has been destroyed by jazz in a good way. Jazz was a gateway to branch out to new people and experiences from different places, different cultures, and different times. It often jogs loose some deep and tightly held personal memories in sometimes poignant ways. Presently, from jazz, a couple of phrases I often carry with me in a lighter vein were written both by Duke Ellington. There's one that I have when somebody asks, "Oh, how's Gail doing, your wife?" And I'll often reply with, "I'm just a lucky so-and-so." If you're familiar with that song, I'm not sure. And also on a lighthearted note, I often think of the words of one of my favorite Duke Ellington songs, played a little earlier by Danny. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. Do what, Do what, do what, do what, do what, do what.
Good morning, all. In the spirit of improvisation, just out of the joke when I was sitting down there, we already had our chalice lighting, but we might have a second lighting because that piano is going to be on fire, Danny. So. I was really happy when Phibun had asked me to take part in this service because when I was growing up from a Latino household that unfortunately was kind of peppered with not the best relationships. I've always tried to find heroes in different places. And this took me to a specific musician that I'm going to speak about today. And so I'm going to briefly discuss the impact that jazz and music had to bridge connections between divisions by owning on a specific jazz and blues pianist. His name is Daryl Davis. If you haven't heard of him, he's a legend in blues, rock and roll, and jazz piano. He's been shoulder to shoulder with legendaries like Chuck Berry, Percy Sledge, Elvis Presley's Jordan Ayers, Jerry Lee Lewis, a long list of other great jazz musicians. He's played in the Muddy Waters Band and has toured all around the world to spread the gospel of jazz or corrupt people with jazz. But his musical mastery is only one slice of the story, and I think this is what I wanted to focus on with his story. Because during one of his performances when he was doing more of his blues and rock and roll era, a white man had come up to him and applauded his talent, which was ironically said he compared his musicality to Jerry Lee Lewis. And the irony was that Jerry Lee Lewis had also taken a lot of his style from other black jazz musicians like Fats Domino's, Muddy Waters, Ray Charles. And just a side note, when I was doing research, I had realized when I read about Jerry Lee Lewis, they had mentioned all of the white jazz pianists first, and then towards the end, they were like, oh yeah, Fats and Muddy as well. But that's just a fun fact, but I digress. So Daryl Davis took this compliment that night and continued to have a conversation with this gentleman. And then the gentleman finally revealed to him that this was the first time he had actually sat down and spoken with a black man. And then the man, kind of weary, flashed him his KKK membership and admitted that he was a member. And this set off a chain of events that eventually would lead Davis to seek an audience with the local KKK chapter head. And after an initial meeting racked with danger and consternation, Davis sat down with Roger Kelly, the head of the Massachusetts branch of the KKK, and began to question Kelly's racist views and vitriol. It was this moment that marked his first steps towards understanding for Davis. Now, Herbie Hancock said the spirit of jazz is the spirit of openness, the spirit of improvisation. And in that moment, I believe that Daryl Davis was showing that openness of jazz. From his upbringing as the son of a foreign officer, Daryl Davis spent his formative years in school in fully diverse schools with children of other foreign officers of all walks of life. He would have classrooms with children of foreign officers from all parts of the world, Africa, Asia, South America, everywhere. So for him, diversity was something commonplace. But then when he came back to the States and joined the Cub Scout at age 10, there was a group of racist white people, white supremacists, that had thrown rocks and water bottles at him. Now, in the young mind of Daryl Davis, he just thought, wow, they really don't like the Cub Scouts, do they? That was the first time that his father had sat down and explained to him what racism was. And for the young Daryl Davis, a question bore into his heart that later affected his trajectory in life, and that question was, how can someone hate me if you don't even know me? This was a question that Davis sought to answer that night when he sat down with Roger Kelly in that hotel room. This initial conversation turned to many contentious but respectful conversations. And in time, those conversations turned to invitations to rallies. It was this curiosity that Davis had in upbringing that gave him the space to listen to Kelly and his organization. By his own admission, Daryl Davis had said that were it not for being grown up, in this son of a foreign officer, with seeing this diversity, he would have never had the chance to question seeing something differently. Had he grown up in the U.S. at the time, he would have seen it more commonplace. But eventually, this initial conversation would lead to the complete dismantlement of the KKK's operation in Maryland, inspiring 200 Klansmen to leave the organization, including Roger Kelly, which are his robes that he's holding on to right now. Roger Kelly gave him those robes when he quit the KKK. And I write this and say this with some inkling of understanding of the frustration that we as people of color have about the shoulder that we burden sometimes, or most of the times, of educating white people. I revisit this story and ask myself, why did it take Daryl putting himself into a possibly life-threatening situation to change a white person's mind? It's not a person of color's sole duty to educate white people, but I keep thinking back of how he wasn't thrust upon or demanded of this by his white counterparts. He did this of his own volition, from his own life and understanding of seeing what jazz had done as he traveled all over the world, seeing how jazz united people, and how you could sit down in a room full of all walks of life and they could all appreciate jazz. And we see that now. Seeing so many of you just tap dancing and grooving and moving along to music, to jazz, it proves the very point that Daryl Davis made when he sat down and tried to listen with respect and understanding, even in the face of someone whose all his views are directly in opposition to his, even when that view of that person meant the death of you. And I think that's so powerful to be able to kind of demystify this person, Roger Kelly, as just a man with views that were flawed, but in his own mind were correct. And to be able to have that space and understanding to just listen and to have a respectful conversation, I think was enough. And he wanted to answer the question, how can someone hate me if they don't know me? And he chose to find the answer for himself. And that doorway that led him to the answer began with jazz. So I believe Davis's story represents the duality of change, the courage to confront racism with love and curiosity instead of the same vitriol, and the role the music had in paving the way to understanding. And to end my part, to quote Dave Brubeck, jazz stands for freedom. It's supposed to be the voice of freedom. So get out there and improvise, take chances, and don't be a perfectionist. Leave that to the classical musicians.
Speaking of, I'm Arthur Neal. Speaking of ad-libbing and improvising, thank you. It's hard to follow. And I also want to apologize to Chris. It's going to sound like I sort of cribbed his notes or something, but it's entirely independent. When people ask me if I like jazz, I of course said yes, because I like essentially all kinds of music. Then I had to ask myself what jazz do I like and why? And I thought of myself as being a latecomer to the enjoyment of jazz until I began looking back. Nowadays, mostly I listen to what I would call soft instrumental jazz, background music while I'm working, pretending that I'm not distracted by it. Now I know perfectly well that I can't do more than one thing at a time that requires my attention. So each time I start thinking about the music, I'm not really concentrating on what I set out as my primary activity. And the problem is, most times when this happens, I'd really rather be listening to and thinking about the music, like when I was trying to write these words. Some days I have jazz on as background music, listening to George Shearing channels on Pandora, occasionally stopping what I'm doing to actually listen. At other times, usually in the evening, but sometimes guiltily during the day, I get seduced by YouTube music videos, but going from one Diana Krall performance to another, or veering off to listen to and watch Andrea Motis, a young trumpet player, singer, and composer from Barcelona that I first encountered when she was a teenager, or branching off to another interesting or unknown musicians. When I actually listen to what is playing, I mostly get distracted thinking about rhythms of the different instruments or the different parts being played on one instrument. I'm especially intrigued by pianists and drummers' abilities to play different tempos with different parts of their bodies, hands, feet, voice. Small digression, I got the best seat in the house today. And good examples of hands, feet, doing different things. It's wonderful. I'm astounded that it's possible to do 3 beats to a measure with one hand and 4 beats to a measure with another, or things even more complicated. I'm sure it is a matter of practice, but more than that, the brain has to have the capability for imagining the tempos and generating the commands to the muscles. A lot is understood about the neural mechanism for generating regular intervals, such as the circadian rhythm that drives our day-night cycle, or the bioelectric mechanical generation of signals that keep our heart beating regularly, very steady. But I admit I'm completely ignorant of any research on how the brain distributes its processing of different tempos. However, that doesn't keep me from contemplating or enjoying jazz and all other music, which I've been doing all my life. The first exposure to jazz that I recall was hearing Dave Brubeck, Take 5, when I was in junior high. This was in the mid-50s, and a friend of mine had one of those new stereo record players and proudly wanted to demonstrate its stereophonic capabilities. This will resonate with a lot of people here in the audience. For that, he chose the track Take 5, the piece by saxophonist Paul Desmond that Chris referred to. When Chris referred, But I was astounded by 2 things: the stereo effect of the recording and the 5/4 rhythmic tempo, which I'd never encountered while playing cornet in my junior high band. I didn't become a jazz convert at that point. Instead, I continued to enjoy the more popular rock and roll like any normal teenager. In college in Pasadena, I mostly remember listening to KFWB, but occasionally to a jazz station, maybe KHJ or KBCA, I don't remember. I went to hear George Shearing at a nightclub out in the valley as my first live jazz experience 60 years ago. It was about this time that I discovered real classical music, not the junior high band type. And classical music, especially Bach, was my primary musical distraction for the next few decades. It was a concert by the pianist Fred Moyer and his trio about 20 years ago that brought me back to jazz, and again it was the rhythmic complexity that appealed to me. Although Fred was playing the note-for-note transcriptions of jazz classics by pianists such as Oscar Peterson and John Coltrane, there was something in Fred's performance that really brought out the different voices. I recommend his album When Summer Comes if y'all run out of other things to listen to. In addition to the temporal complexity, there is frequency complexity, i.e. the sound, which is of course exhibited in both classical and jazz, the variety of sound. Again, I think it was Fred Moyer's concert that opened my consciousness to how complicated real-world chord structure can be, not just major and minor chords and standard chord progressions. I'd gotten an inkling of this in some of the guitar music I tried to play, apparently not as good as Chris, but I did not realize how little I knew. I was going to end with my great realization that the greatest jazz musician and composer of all time is Johann Sebastian Bach. But a simple search on Google told me I'm really late in discovering that. Those of you who are old enough may remember the Swingle Singers, I don't know, whose vocalization of Bach's music became popular in the 1960s, just about the time I was introduced to George Shearing. I think both can be called jazz, but how could they be more different, yet both be so interesting and enjoyable?
So again, I'm Phibun Ni. When I was in high school, I realized that I really liked elevator music, mostly instrumental music. It wasn't something you told your high school friends or sports teammates. One of my favorite radio stations was 94.7, The Wave. As I've grown older, I found out it was called smooth jazz or contemporary jazz, and I found other people who loved it as well. But I love all kinds of jazz and blues. I've gone to several jazz festivals here in Long Beach, in Newport Beach, and at the Hollywood Bowl. Nothing beats listening to jazz outside on a balmy summer night at the Hollywood Bowl, grooving to the music and watching other people dance and enjoy the music too. It's a good time and one of those things that I'm grateful in life. One of my favorite songs by my favorite smooth jazz artist is Dave Koz, Honey Dipped. He plays the saxophone with so much energy and feeling and humor. Honey Dipped is an upbeat piece with some notes of a wistful, yearning feeling. Check it out on YouTube. According to Wikipedia, jazz is a music genre that originated in the African American communities of New Orleans, Louisiana, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, with its roots in blues, ragtime, European harmony, and African rhythmic rituals. Jazz is characterized by swing and blue notes, complex chords, call and response vocals, polyrhythms, and improvisation. When I was in PT school, I was lucky enough to go to New Orleans for a physical therapy conference with some of my classmates. I don't remember what I learned at the conference, but during my exploration of New Orleans, I found delectable treats called beignets, and I heard the Preservation Hall band playing. They were amazing. Recently, they played here in La Mirada, or close to here, and I brought Gail and Chris Kempf with me, and we all really enjoyed it. There are many great female jazz artists, but two that come to mind that use their musical gifts to change society are Nina Simone and Billie Holiday. According to Wikipedia, Nina Simone, born Eunice Kathleen Wayman, was an African-American singer, songwriter, pianist, composer, arranger, and civil rights activist. Her music spans styles including classical, folk, gospel, blues, jazz, R&B, and pop. On her debut album for Philips, Nina Simone in Concert, 1964, for the first time she addressed racial inequality in the U.S. in the song Mississippi Goddamn. This was her response to the June 12, 1963 murder of Medgar Evers and the September 15, 1963 bombing of the 6th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, Alabama, that killed 4 young black girls and partly blinded a 5th. The song was released as a single, and it was boycotted in some of the southern states. I learned about Billie Holiday's life from a movie about her titled The United States versus Billie Holiday. She didn't usually sing songs about the plight of black people, but she made an exception for Strange Fruit, which was originally a poem written by a teacher who was Jewish. Billie Holiday sang and recorded it in 1939. The song was a protest against the lynching of black people in the South, and it compares black victims hanging to the fruit of poplar trees. By the time she sang the song, lynching had been going on for decades. Lynching wasn't just a way for white people to keep black people in line. It was also in some places treated like a sport. Billie took a big risk to her career by recording the song and singing it in the South. She would usually end her performances with the song and usually left the audiences silent after she finished singing it. But she kept singing the song, and because of this, the director of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, Harry Anslinger, who had espoused racist comments, saw to it that Holiday, who struggled with drug use, was targeted, pursued, and arrested in 1947 for possession of narcotics. After her release from prison, Holiday was barred from securing a cabaret performer's license, and this ended her nightclub performances. However, she continued to perform in concerts, like at Carnegie Hall, and she continued to be targeted by Harry until she died at the age of 44. But her legacy lived on. In 1999, Time designated Strange Fruit the song of the century. In both these examples, these artists used their musical talent to bring joy to people and to change society, and they risked their lives in doing so. This inspires me to use any skill or talent that I have to help make the world a better place, and I see this in the people I've met at this church. Thank you. Thank you. And now we have the hymn, Come and Go With Me, number 1018. Thank you. And I forgot to mention, I have these little dolls that my friend Ushi gave me because she knows I like jazz, and one of them is Billie Holiday. Okay, now for the benediction. May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us now and always. And now we extinguish our chalice. May the light and truth go with you, and see you next week.